The Shepherd Treasure, Supplementary Reader, Class 6, Unit 3, NCERT Text, CBSE. The Shepherd Treasure. In a village in Iran, there once lived a shepherd. He was very poor. He did not have even a small cottage of his own. He had never been to school or learned to read and write, for there were very few schools in those days. So now the Shepherd Treasure is a story of a poor shepherd once who lived in Iran. Though he was uneducated, he was very wise and helpful, and the king decided to meet him in disguise. Disguise means pretended to be someone else in a different attire or dress. So in a village in Iran there lived once a shepherd, and he was very poor, and he did not have even a small cottage of his own, and he never went to school. He was not knowing how to read, write, for there were very few schools at that time, and he was not able to go to school because of that. Though poor and uneducated, the shepherd was very wise. He understood people's sorrow and troubles and helped them face their problem with courage and common sense. Though he was uneducated, this shepherd was very wise, intelligent, and he used to understand the sorrows and troubles and problems of the people, and he used to help them to face their problem, and he just gave them courage and common sense to face them. Many people came to him for advice. So many people were there who used to come for advice, which he used to give to them. Soon he became famous for his wisdom and friendly nature. So he was now very popular because of his wisdom and friendly nature. The king of the country heard about him and thought of meeting him. Now the king also heard about him, and he also wanted to meet this person. Disguised as a shepherd and riding on a mule, one day the king came to the cave where the wise shepherd lived. So what happened? One day what happened? This king disguised as a shepherd. Disguise means, I already told you, to pretend to be or in a different attire or dress. Riding on a mule means it is an offspring of donkey or a horse. And this particular king came to his cave where this particular wise man lived. As soon as the shepherd saw the traveler coming towards the cave, he rose to welcome him, and he took the tired traveler inside the cave, gave him water to drink and a share of his own meager meal. The king rested for the night in the cave and was greatly impressed by the shepherd's hospitality and wise conversation. So now what happened was that as the shepherd saw the traveler coming to the cave, he welcomed him and he took him to inside the cave, and he made him to drink water and shared his own meager meal. Meager means a little meal what he had. The king rested for the night in the cave and was greatly impressed by the shepherd's hospitality. Hospitality means to take care of, and wise conversation, and the conversation he made with him, that was very intelligent enough to may impress the king. Though still tired, the king decided to depart the next morning. So though he was tired, but still he wanted to go. He said, "Many thanks for your kindness to a poor traveler. I have a long way to go. Permit me to leave." Now he said to this person that he wanted to leave because he has to go to a far off place, and he wanted his permission to leave. Looking straight into the eyes of his guest, the shepherd replied, "Thank you, Your Majesty, for paying me the compliment of the visit." Now shepherd just thanked him, and he said, Your Majesty, for paying me the compliment of the visit. Okay, so he was he had an understanding that it was the king. The king was astonished as well as pleased, and he is indeed very wise, and he thought to himself, I need people like him to work for me. And the king appointed this humble shepherd the governor of the smart district. So the king was astonished. Astonished here means he was surprised to see that he has understood who he was, and he thought that he should give him a chance because he is a very wise man, and he wanted a person like him to uh, what rule his kingdom. Although he rose to power and dignity, the shepherd remained as humble as ever. People loved and honored him for his wisdom, sympathy, and goodness, and he was kind and just to one and all. His fame as a fair and wise governor soon spread throughout the country. So, though he was having the power and dignity, uh, this shepherd remained humble, and he uh, never left his goodness. He had the wisdom, he had the sympathy. He was very fair in his works, and though he had the fame, he never made his power to be misused. And this fairness and wiseness of this governor spread throughout the country. Now, the governor of other provinces grew terribly jealous of him and began to talk to the king against him. Now, what happened? Other governors tried to talk against him because they were jealous of him. They said he is very dishonest and keeps for himself part of the money that he collects as a tax from the people. So now they started telling the king that he used to keep a box in which he used to have a money that he collects as tax. Why did he always carry with him? They added an iron chest. An iron chest means an iron box. Perhaps he carried in it the treasure that he had secretly collected. Now they also blame that it must be some type of treasure he secretly collected that was with him. So this is what the other governors said to the king. After all, they said mockingly, he was an ordinary shepherd and could behave no better. So now they said that he is just an ordinary shepherd, so he will not behave like a governor. They said mockingly. Mockingly here means they made fun of him. They made fun of him. And he was an ordinary shepherd and could behave no better. Now, coming to the next part is the new governor was called to the palace, and he was ordered to explain why always he carried an iron chest and the chest contained no gold or silver. So, this is what is going to be in this part. At first, the king did not pay attention to these reports, but how long could he ignore these governors and their endless stories about the shepherd? One thing was certain, the king discovered the new governor did carry an old chest with him all the time. So now, at first, the king was not giving that much of attention to the report, but after so many complaints, he also had to take action. So what he did, he now wanted to discover what actually is there in that particular iron chest. So one day the new governor was summoned. Summoned here means to be called to the palace, and he came riding on his camel And to everyone's delight, the famous iron chest was there fastened securely behind him on the camel's back. So now he came with that of the iron chest on his camel to the palace, and all were delighted because they were able to prove that there was a iron chest. Now the king was angry. He thundered, "Why do you always carry that iron chest with you? What does it contain?" The governor smiled. He asked his servants to bring in the chest. How eagerly the people standing around, waiting for the shepherd to be found out. But how great was their astonishment, and even of the king himself, when the chest was opened. No gold or silver or jewels, but an old blanket was all that came out. So now what happened was, now the king was angry. He thundered. Thundered means he bursted out. Why do you always carry that iron chest, that box with you? What does it contain? So all these questions were being asked by the king. The governor smiled, and he said to the servant, his servant, to bring that particular iron box. And now, how eagerly the people standing around were waiting. Eagerly means we were very impatiently waiting um, for this thing to be known, that what is there in the box. But how great was the astonishment! Astonishment means they were how great that surprise was. And what actually was, there was no gold, no silver on the or the jewels, but there was an old blanket which came out. So this was a surprise. Holding it proudly, the shepherd said, "This, my dear master, is my only treasure. I always carry it with me." So he said that this is only his treasure he carries with him. But why do you carry such an ordinary blanket with you? Now the king asked why he carries such an ordinary blanket with him. Surely you are the governor of a district. Now, as you are the governor of the district, you don't need to carry this old blanket, the king asked. To which the shepherd replied with quiet dignity. The shepherd replied with dignity that this blanket is my oldest friend. So now he says that this is the my oldest friend. It will still protect me if at any time. So he said that any time it will protect me. It will always be there with me. Your Majesty should wish to take away my new cloak. You can take my new cloak, but not this. How pleased the king was. Now the king was very pleased, and how embarrassed the jealous governors became. So embarrassed here means they were very confused and was perplexed. Okay. To hear the wise men's reply. Now they knew that the shepherd was indeed the humblest and the wisest man in the land. Now they understood that this shepherd was the wisest and the humblest man. The king made him the governor of a much bigger district than very day. That very day, the king, what he did, he made him the governor of a bigger district than he had. So this was the story, and it was an Iranian folk tale. Now coming to the question answers of the lesson. The shepherd hadn't been to school because he was very poor. There were very few schools in those days. He wasn't interested in studies. So what is the answer? There were very few schools. This is the answer. Now coming to the next one is who visited the shepherd one day? The king of the country visited the shepherd one day because he was famous for his wisdom and friendly nature. King heard about him and thought of meeting him to know the truth. Why did the other governors grow jealous of the shepherd? The other governors, here it is grew. Okay, it is not grow, it is grew over here. Jealous of the shepherd because he rose to power, and his fame as a fair and a wise governor soon spread throughout the country. Why was the new governor called to the palace? The new governor was called to the palace because he used to carry an iron chest with him all the time, and the king wanted to know the secret of the chest. Why was everyone delighted to see the iron chest on the camel's back? Everyone was delighted to see the iron chest on the camel's back because the other governors were sure that he collected all his treasure in his iron chest, and when it would be opened in front of the king, his dishonesty will be revealed. What did the iron chest contain? The iron chest contained an old blanket. And why did the shepherd always carry it? The shepherd always carried it because it was an oldest friend and will still protect him any time, even when the king took away his clothes. Cloak. New cloak means it refers to the post of the governor. Is it an example of the shepherd's humanity or wisdom of both? It is an example of both shepherd's humility and wisdom. How did the king reward the new governor? The king rewarded him by making him the governor of a much bigger district. Now here is the summary of the lesson. The shepherd's treasure. Once there lived a poor and illiterate shepherd in a village in Iran, and he hadn't been to school because there were very few schools in those days. However, he had a high common sense. He had also a friendly and a helpful nature. Many people came to him for advice. They were able to get rid of their sorrows and troubles. One day the king visited the shepherd, and he rode on his mule and reached the wise shepherd's cave. The shepherds welcomed the king in the shepherd's disguise warmly, and they remained busy in wise conversation and stayed together at night. Next morning, the king thanked the shepherd of his hospitality, and the shepherd looked straight into the traveller's eye. He addressed him as Your Majesty, and the king was surprised and pleased at his wisdom. Just then, the king appointed the shepherd the governor of the small district. The new governor won people's love, and he became famous as a fair and a wise governor. The governor of other provinces became jealous of him, and they could not tolerate his popularity among the people. They were also jealous of the importance of the king gave him, and they reported that he kept a part of the tax collected into an iron chest. He carried it with him all the time. At first, the king ignored these reports, but he could not do so for a long time, and one thing was certain, it was that the new governor always carried an iron chest with him. So one day the king called the new governor to the palace. The new governor came to the king's court. The iron chest was even then fastened behind him on the camel's back. Everyone was delighted to see it, and they thought there were jewels in the chest, so they hoped that the new governor would prove to be a thief. On the opening of the chest, the king asked the new governor what was there in his iron chest. The new governor got the chest open, and it contained an old blanket. The shepherd called it his only treasure and the oldest friend, and he carried the blanket all the time because this alone was his real wealth. Everything else belonged to the king. It was an example of shepherd's humility and wisdom, and the king realized his wisdom, and he made him the governor of much bigger district as a reward. Next question is, the story of shepherd teaches us humanitarian values. Do you agree? The shepherd was an embodiment of wisdom and kindness. He earned the honor bestowed upon him by the king. The king decided to meet him when he heard about the courage and common sense. The king went in a disguise to him, who who greeted him. The shepherd bade him farewell by calling him Your Majesty, and this surprised the king. He made him the governor of the small state. When false accusation was laid on him, he gave a reply with poise and dignity, and the value that can be learned from him are honesty, wisdom, and compassion. If you were shepherd, should you be discouraged for having negative people or give a benefiting reply comment? The popularity of the new governor made the other generals jealous and insecure, and they tried to defame him by his truthfulness and dishonesty, helping him in embarking the success. If I were the shepherd, I would have led an exemplary life like him. I wouldn't give up before the negative approach of others. One should have ideals in life. So this was the question. Coming to the next one is, why did the other governors um, jealous of the shepherd? The common shepherd was appointed as the governor of the small district, and he was loved and honored by the people. His fame spread far and wide, so the governor of the other province grew jealous of him. Why was everyone delighted to see the iron chest? Everyone was delighted to see the iron chest fastened securely behind him on the camel's back. The counselor had warned the king that he was dishonest and stored all the treasures that he collected in the iron chest. They were convinced that he had brought the iron chest with him. It would be opened and his dishonesty would be revealed to the king. Now that was the end of the lesson. The shepherd pressure.